Roll call. Mr. Alt?
Here.
Mr. Beistel?
Here.
Mr. Betts? Mr. Carson? Mr. Fry?
Here.
Mr. Polakowski?
Here.
Mrs. Rhodes? Here. Mrs. Smith?
Here.
Mrs. Lowe?
Here. Citizens' comments?
Catherine Fike.
According to my best calculations, ever since the Southmoreland School Board started to record and publicly air its meetings, there have been about 250 or so public media showings over the years. Along with that, to the best of my knowledge, there has never been a demand from a superintendent for the board to vote at a meeting to implement this long-standing practice. That is until now. It is shocking to me that one individual can engage in censorship and unilaterally deny the public the right to know what is happening at a public budget meeting. More shocking was to hear a board member refuse to vote yes to keep the tax-paying public informed as to how their money is being spent. There is no doubt in my mind that a particular board member will tonight make or second a motion to once again raise taxes on an already impoverished citizenry. In the last 15 years, our spending has gone up nearly 40%, while our student enrollment has declined by about 25%. This is about a 60-65% disparity. The fewer students we have, the more money we tax and spend. Cicero, the great Roman orator, said, "A nation can survive its fools and even the ambitious, but it cannot survive treason from within." A nation can survive its fools and even the ambitious. It cannot survive treason from within. The light that I see at the end of the tunnel is in the immediate future, we will have a new breath of hope with our incoming superintendent. At this time, I believe that Vince is a man of proven integrity, honesty, and morality who will not work to undermine the taxpayers for the benefit of special interests or individuals. I believe that he will be a strong and competent administrator who will not abandon his responsibilities and let the teachers' union run the district instead. Many of us long ago have given up on hope for ethical and effective school budget management, and our hope lies with our new superintendent. Vince, I believe that you will prove me right. I wish you the very best in these very difficult times. Good luck.
Randy Hillhall.
Good evening. Last week when I was here, I was deeply disappointed on how the vote took shape for the autistic support class. These fine students need more consideration than a floor scrubber, a Conklin roof, or parking lots. They deserve your attention, your understanding, your willingness to come prepared for the vote. And most importantly, they deserve your vote to keep them in district. When my son was diagnosed with autism in 2007, the statistics were 1 in 94 children had a diagnosis of being on the spectrum. There are surveys today that show 1 in 45 children ages 3 through 17 have been diagnosed. Autistic issues aren't going anywhere. At any rate, this class is needed, and it will be used. The statistics alone will tell you that. There are now four students showing to be going into the 9th grade. You have more coming behind them. I would be willing to place a bet with any one of you or donate to your favorite charity that this class will be used by more than these 4 students. My son has been in Southmoreland since kindergarten. he had to spend 1 year out of district in 6th grade, which in our opinion should not have happened. We feel that he did not have great growth that year. When he was there, he asked why he wasn't at the middle school. He was able to come back. Going out of district again just isn't acceptable, especially for his continued progress. We don't want to see him regress. These past 2 years have been two of the best that he's had in his academic career, and we thank that to Mr. Haichu and putting together a great team with his teachers, his aides, the administration, and we also give it natural maturation. My son is a student. He has become a true student. Last week, his progress report came. These are his grades that I don't mind sharing with you. And keep in mind, most of his classes are in the autistic support, but music, 100. Language arts, 81. Reading, 93. Math, 81. Phys ed, 100. STEM, 90. Science, 95. Geography, 99. These other 3 students are students too. They aren't looking for someone or a class just to keep them occupied. They matter. They need you to do your job. They need you to focus on the right for a quality education, an education that's given in the least restrictive environment. That is what we ask for their voice. Do what is right. And time is important. In our view, this should not even be up for a vote. Moving on to high school should be a rite of passage, like it is for the rest of their 8th grade classmates. They deserve to be in Southmoreland. They belong in Southmoreland. Please, do the right thing. Keep them in Southmoreland. Thank you.
Thank you. No minutes this evening, it's a special meeting.
Reports are provided.
Yeah, I have a couple of things. I was asked to provide a cost comparison of administrative costs between our district and some other districts in the county. Looking at it in one respect, out of 17 districts in the county, 16 responded to a survey, and administrative cost-wise, we were second from the bottom there. And on a survey that was done by the intermediate unit, looking at that one, our administrative costs were at 3.08% of our total budget, which I believe was the second lowest in the county of all the districts that responded. So I wanted to share that information with you as well. And then under budget discussion,
Can I ask you something?
Sure can.
Why don't you include Fayette County?
it's for Westmoreland County School. If you want me to, I'll do Fayette County as well.
I don't need to. I get your drift, but I think it was inappropriate that you didn't include all of our districts. We go to 2 districts, Fayette and Westmoreland. It's not truly reflective of what you put out today.
Right.
But you don't need to go any further.
Well, the information that I had at my fingertips, Ken, was the salary survey that was done by the Westmoreland Intermediate Unit. I don't get information from Fayette County, the IU1, but I'll be sure and get that for you. Superintendent's budget discussion, I just put a document in front of you you can take a look at. Just a couple things to talk about here. According to openpa.gov, 7 of the 17 school districts in Westmoreland County had lower per pupil spending than Southmoreland did. This is in fiscal year 15-16, which is the latest one data was available for. Our per pupil expenditures were $14,646. Looking at similarly sized schools in our county, per pupil costs range from $14,646, which was ours, to $20,602. Our tax millage rate is still the lowest in Westmoreland County, and in Fayette County, we're 0.7 of a mil above the lowest tax district and 4.5 mils lower than the highest tax district. And then there's some more information there about some things that we tried to do as we were preparing the budget, and I'll let you read that at your leisure. Takes us to old business.
Old business.
high school autistic support program.
We were asked to table that until this week, so again, it's recommended that the board authorize the creation of a high school level autistic support program to be housed at Southmoreland High School, beginning with the 2018-19 school year.
Can we ask questions, or do you have to have a motion on the table? or
A motion and a
discuss?
second, then we discuss.
I'll make that motion.
Questions?
Yeah, I just wondered, has there been any, like forecast of, like a 5-year plan? We start now with a certain cost. Has there been anything like costed out for 5 years to tell us, maybe give us an idea how much that's going to increase?
I want to call on Mr. Haichu to answer that question. He's been working on this project for us.
What I've previously presented to the board are the numbers for our current costs in comparison to our anticipated costs for next school year. What I can tell you is, for this upcoming school year, as I presented earlier, we have 3 current 8th grade students in our autistic support program at our middle school. We have 2 students currently in out-of-district placements. For the subsequent school year, we will have 6 students who are currently 7th grade students at our autistic support program who will be transitioning to high school in the school year 2019-2020. At that point, that program, and for the foreseeable future, for the remainder of their high school careers, that program will be near its capacity and will be paying for itself immensely in comparison to out-of-district placements for those number of students should we not have that program in place.
How many students, how many teachers do you have to have per students?
The regulations that we have on autistic support programs are the maximum number of students you can have in that program is 8 students if they are considered or designated full-time students. If they are considered itinerant level support students, you can have up to 12 students in that program. What we do is we have a variety of students who are classified as either itinerant level support, supplemental level of support, or full-time level of support. There's a calculation involved that determines the maximum capacity you can have in that classroom depending on the designation of the student. So theoretically, we can have as few as, or as many as 12 students in that program, and we can have as few as 8 or less given the population. And what our concern is not for this coming school year in terms of the number of students we'll have. We will be able to have those students in that program for subsequent school years. The importance of this conversation is the continuity of services for our current 8th grade students who are moving to 9th grade. If we have the 5th student, theoretically, that I mentioned last meeting, come back from our out-of-district placement, that program will actually save the district approximately, I believe it was $800.
That's if we have the 5th student come back.
Pardon me?
That's if the 5th student comes back.
If the 5th student comes back. I've spoken with his mother and the student, and they're both open and willingly considering that option. I want to be in a position where they can come in and meet with a teacher and see a program developing so that they can make that decision.
What it's going to cost this year to get this program started with teachers and everything that you need to get this thing underway?
Well, based on the numbers that we've run, our anticipated cost for the first year is the $121,544 number. Our expenses for those 5 students to go out of district next year is $122,437. So as I said, an approximate savings of in the neighborhood of $800 to $900, provided that we have that ideal scenario. One of the things that I would mention as well, and I've mentioned this previously, our school district tends to have a lot of students that come into our school district. And many of those students coming into our school district have disability-related needs. Last month, we're in May now, in between March and April of this year alone, we've had 9 students enter our school district that have high degrees of special education needs, all of whom we're currently servicing in-school programs that we have. So, as I think Mr. Ho even referenced in his comments, there is the possibility that even though we might be starting out with 4 or 5 students in that program on day 1 of this incoming school year, by the end of next school year, there's a probability, I can't say a likelihood, but a probability that we'll have incoming students as a result of families that have moved into our school district.
Do any of our neighboring school districts offer this at the high school level? Like Connellsville or Mount Pleasant?
Mount Pleasant currently does not have an autistic support program at their high school level. One of the things that Mount Pleasant currently does is they provide life skills programming to their students who have autism spectrum disorders. One option that is available to our school district is to offer placements for students with autism spectrum disorders to students in out-of-district placements to come to our program. We currently have a student from an out-of-district program in our autistic support program at one of our buildings. That student would not be able to return next year because we would be out of compliance with our numbers. So at this point, I am not in favor of advertising to other school districts, send us your students, and then when our influx comes in, be in a position where I have to say to that school district, I need you to take your student back. But that is an option that we have if that's something that we absolutely need to do.
Now, they do pay tuition for their children coming out of other school districts into ours.
I will defer that question to Dr. Molnar, who has better knowledge of that than do I.
Yes, they do. I can't tell you what the number is off the top of my head, but they do pay tuition, yes.
And this,
And I think that we would be looking in the future, if we were to accept tuition students, my recommendation would be to charge a tuition that would be commensurate with a tuition at one of the outplaced schools, or perhaps the tuition that we're charged by one of our cyber schools for a special education student. That would be a good benchmark to start with in terms of deciding what that tuition rate should be.
the startup, would you say 121 something? That will cover everything.
That's our expected and anticipated costs based on the costs we had for the setup of the middle school program a couple of years ago. What I will say is that the classroom materials, supplies, and equipment costs that I provided you from last school year of $10,572 would also be a one-time cost. So that's not a cost that I would anticipate having for every subsequent school year. The continued cost for subsequent school years would be the teacher salary and paraprofessional salary and benefits costs.
Rowan, can you say again how many 7th graders?
We currently have 6 7th graders who will be 8th graders next school year, and then subsequently 9th graders in the 1920 school year.
Okay.
What happens, when you say you can have 8 students full-time with 1 teacher, how many students do you have room for? Like space for? What's your limit? What's the limit that you'll take?
The limit is done based on that calculation. So to make it as simple as I can make it, 8 students for full-time or supplemental, 12 students if they're all itinerant. So if I have 6 students who require an itinerant level of support, 6 of 12 is 50%. If I have 4 students who require supplemental or full-time, 4 of 8 is 50%. So that is my max. 4 students with supplemental to full-time need and 6 students with itinerant level need gives me 10 students that I can have at a maximum when I have different levels of support required.
So in other words, the capacity of the class is dependent upon the needs of the student. So a full-time student requires support in that classroom what percentage of time?
80 to 100% of the time.
And supplemental would be what percentage of time?
40 to 80.
And then less than 40 would be considered itinerant.
Yes.
So it depends on how much time they're actually needed to spend in that class.
And one of the things that we're able to do is with the IEP and the IEP process, we can ensure that we're providing students with the least restrictive environment and providing a combination of supports as well. So we have learning support available in our high school in addition to regular education. So in instances where I have a student that has autistic support needs, I can have that student actually participate in a learning support classroom even though they have an autistic support designation, and part of their time can be in the regular education program as well. And in that instance, we may be able to get the autistic support provision service level down to an itinerant level, which enables us to maximize the number of students that we can service with the programming availability that we have in our schools.
One thing concerns me is, once we start this program, and it doesn't, I know the first year what we're going to cost us, but when the program starts, we don't have a problem with children, is, oh, we forgot this, we need this, we need more teachers, we need this. Because the budget situation we're in right now, I mean, I'd love to do it, but is this going to be solved? When you tell me 121,000 for this year.
Is the question, do I think we're going to need more than 121,000? At this point, I have no reason to believe that we do.
That's what I'm looking for.
I can't tell you with 100% certainty that we won't need 122,000,
Well,
but
I understand, but I don't want to come up and say, okay, we need another $50,000, what are we going to get?
right,
I don't want to cheat the kids that need it, and I want a firm answer. I mean, I could see it going up maybe $1,000, $2,000, $3,000, but not $50,000 or $60,000 the first year because you forgot something.
that will not happen. Not that degree of a change in cost need.
I have a question.
Yes, sir.
Do we have any written policy to address all these issues, both for the student and as well as the financial aspect of it? We sat here and we listened to all these what-ifs and et cetera. The program is a great idea, don't get me wrong. But I would like to see, I don't know how we can vote on something when we have no policies that address this issue. And again, I'm not against anything. I think we need to develop the policies that outline all this, because over the years that I've been on the board 12, I've seen too many programs run wild in the end. And I don't want to see that happen with this program.
Hey, Ken,
It's not because of the kids.
if I could please respond to that. This is a program that we started at the primary center 10 years ago. It hasn't run wild. We expanded it to the elementary school when those kids aged out of the primary center. It hasn't run wild. We expanded
Do you have
it.
a policy on those?
There's no policy on, I don't know how you would write a policy on not letting a program run.
What I'm talking about is, what are you going to do when you have the maximum of 8 and then you now have to send them all out, or not them, not the 8, but you have the art district. Now we're back to square one again.
Well, that would be a decision that the board would have to make as to whether or not they want to add an additional teacher to.
That's what I was
to
asking. I
accommodate,
wasn't asking
additional students, or if you would want to send them out, and that would be your decision to
And by
make.
the same aspect, if we have a whole lot of ones that we have to art district and we have 1 or 2 back here that stay, and again, going back to, we never cut these programs. Once they're started, we've got them forever.
If I may respond.
We did cut our alt-ed program. We no longer have that.
But, what are we going to do? Because I just can't see somebody coming in and saying, well, okay, we're going to do away with the program because we're down to 1 or 2. And I'm not saying that's good, bad, or different. We need to have policy that dictates in the future. We go flying by our pants half the time when we're in here, at least my opinion.
Well, Ken, we would have to have policy for every class we have, math,
We're talking about a lot of money here.
Well, I know, every program should have a policy then.
Well, then I guess we should
But
develop.
I don't think that makes any sense.
Can you answer my questions of what I just said? When we have to send them out district and we have a full house here, what are you going to do?
May I respond to that? If we have a situation which is very plausible, where we bring a high school life skills support program to our high school, and within 2 years it's at capacity, and then we have other students moving up, and we cannot accommodate those students in that program, we're at a point where, as Dr. Malnar indicated, we'd have to look at either adding a teacher or sending students out. That being said, we're still going to save money for the district if we have that program in place and are servicing the maximum number of our school district's population students that we can. If we have to send 1 or 2 students out at that time, if we didn't have that program, we would be sending 10, 11, 12, or 13 students out at that time, and that would be a bigger financial burden on the district than the situation of us having a program in-house where we're serving the most that we're capable of serving with that program in place.
And if we would need to add another teacher, we'd be doing this all over again.
That's
Like
correct.
we are now, Ken. We wouldn't just hire a teacher without board approval, would we? Oh, okay.
So Ron, how many students can one teacher and one paraprofessional handle in a classroom? Is it the 12 total?
Yes.
So if we get 2 more moved in, then they would have to be sent out of district if we would indeed do the program, start the program?
That's a possibility.
No, because that would only be 7, right?
Pardon me?
If we got 2 more in, that'd only be 7, because we only have 5.
She was saying if we had our maximum of
Maximum.
12,
Oh,
The
okay.
maximum.
which we will not have for this coming school year.
And to be transparent, there would be a teacher and a classroom paraprofessional. Some of our students require one-on-one assistance, and they would require that assistance whether they are in our district or out of our district. We have students at Clalion Heights, and we pay for a one-on-one assistant for them. We have students here in our program that require one-on-one assistance daily, and that's...
And those
doesn't matter
folks
where
are
they
already in place, so they're not an added cost. Now, if we would have a student move in from another state, and that student had a personal care assistant assigned to that student in his or her IEP, then we would need to look at providing that as an additional service to that student. The law requires us to do that.
Would we then hire another teacher, or would that be a paraprofessional?
It would not be another teacher, it would be a paraprofessional if it was a PCA designated in the student's IEP. And one of the things that I should also share with you is that since I've been here, for the 2 years that I've been here, we've been actively looking with our teaching staff, our special education staff, at working on FADE plans for students with PCAs, because it is my vision, as well as the vision of our teachers, to promote independence development for our students regardless of their disability. Only in those instances when students absolutely need PCA, personal care assistant, paraprofessional support, do we look to continue that support. It's not something that I or our teaching staff take lightly in terms of just saying, without due consideration, that a student needs to have a paraprofessional, which incurs a cost upon the school district. Mr. Marnell?
To help all of us, let's broaden our understanding here. How many autistic teachers and PCAs do we have at the primary center?
We have one teacher at the primary center.
How many at the elementary school?
One.
One, okay. In the middle school here?
One.
One. And we're not at near capacity at any three of those levels?
Pardon me?
Are we near capacity at any three of those levels, primary, elementary, or middle?
Elementary and middle.
Elementary and middle.
What was that question, Jim? We're at our max?
Are we near max
Okay, that's
at
what I
any
thought.
one of the three levels? I'm thinking of, in this, the analogy of like a sports program, the feeder program.
Right.
Because I think what Ron's alluding to, that possibly your first awareness of a potentially being at the maximum number that a teacher can handle would be at one of these three levels. Especially at the primary center, kids are get identified much earlier now than they were in prior years. And like you said, the other indication would be someone that you're totally unaware of moves into the district and hits at any one of those levels. So,
Did you say the middle school was all nearing its max?
Yes.
So what happens if you take that max and you add it to the ones that are moving up now? Well, what's that going to put us at in the high school program?
For this coming school year,
for the following
for the
year.
following school year, we will be near capacity at the high school.
With the one teacher.
With the one teacher and the one paraprofessional.
it's almost like when you see the movement from grade levels, from first to second, second to third, and then from fifth to this building.
So
sixth
conceivably, in year two, we may be forced to hire a second teacher and a second aide until those children go through the system.
Probably not until year 3, Mr. Alt, but that's not inconceivable.
So then as they graduate, they would be able to, I guess, lay off that teacher. If we start getting the number back down to where it's manageable for one, is that going to be a problem for us to help someone hire the second person?
Again, the one thing that I would reiterate is,
You can hire one, yeah.
in 3 years, if we have a high school autistic support classroom at capacity, and we need to send 1, 2, 3, or 4 students out of district, that's still going to cost us less money than if we have to send 13, 14, 15 students out of district for autistic support programming.
Who's going to decide that?
Pardon me?
Who's going to decide who makes the cut? We're over capacity, we got 4 kids.
The students who are in the program stay in the program.
Oh, okay. So the ones coming up they may not make the cut.
Be like a first come, first served.
Do you know the approximate cost tuition for them to be sent out of district?
Well, from our last worksheet, what I have here is we currently have 3 programs that we use outside of district for autistic support programming for our students. When I averaged the cost of those 3 programs, which were very similar, the low that I had was $23,423. the high I had was 25,841. The average I came up with was 24,391. So, you know, we're in that mid-range of $20,000, $23,000, $24,000, $25,000 per student. Now that does vary to some degree depending on whether or not the student has need for occupational therapy, physical therapy, and speech and language therapy services in addition. The nice thing about keeping students in our program here, we're not paying for speech and language therapy services as we do for our students who are going out of district for that additional service, because we have speech and language therapists with whom we have employed and through whom we contract with the IU for such services.
And quality of life for that student, not having to ride a van or a minibus, the time each day going to and from improves that child's.
Well, and that's a great point, but the point that we really need to focus on, quite honestly, is the quality of instruction that students are receiving. When students are in our programs, building principals and myself oversee what that instruction looks like. When students are in out-of-district placements and I go to their IEP meetings and I see what the nature of that instruction is, it saddens me. I know our kids are going to get a better education with our teachers, with our district administration supervision of those teachers, and with my ability to go in and get teachers professional development as they need it to improve their teaching set. I think the fact that we were able to interview and hire an exceptional team for our middle school program is well illustrated in the comments of our citizen this evening. This is what our focus needs to be, the quality of education that our students are getting. They have the opportunity to feel like they're a part of this school district. They deserve that. They get to be with non-disabled peers. When they're in out-of-district placements, there's no opportunity for them to be with non-disabled peers.
Does anybody else have any questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
Roll call.
Mr. Old?
Reluctantly, no.
Mr. Beistel?
Yes.
Mr. Carson?
Yes.
Mr. Fry?
Yes.
Mr. Polakowski?
Yes.
Mrs. Rhodes?
No.
Mrs. Smith?
Yes.
Mrs. Love?
Yes.
Motion carries. 6, 2 no, and 1 absent.
New business.
Under new business, first of all, congratulations to our girls softball team. For the first time ever, they will be headed for the WPIAL finals, and that will occur next week. It's been suggested by a couple of folks that the district provide a coach bus for the girls softball team to travel to their playoff game, which would be at Seton Hill University. The cost differential between a coach and a school bus is about $500. On June the 4th, the girls will travel to the PIAA championships. We're not sure where they will be held in the state at this point in time because that location and date has not yet, the location has not been announced, the date has. So open that for discussion if there's interest there.
I'll make a motion.
Second.
I think Mrs. Smith got it. Is it a voice vote or is that
That's a roll
a
call.
roll call?
I have a question.
Oh.
That $500, Jack, is that for 2 bus trips or is it for the whole time?
That's for,
Just one?
that's a round trip for one
That's
trip.
that game and back on.
Yeah. Hey, Charlie, you can correct my numbers here, but from what Laura said, depending on the layover and so on and so forth, the school bus cost us about $150. And for a coach, we get a flat rate of $650.
So this is to the PIA
No, this your vote right now is for the Whippeals, which is in
Seton
Greensburg.
Hill?
And then they'll also be going to the PIAA. So, you know, you can vote to provide a coach for one, both, or none. That's entirely up to you folks.
I believe we do this for the football team too, right?
Usually the Bears booster club will pay the difference in the football.
But if it's the Whippiols, we pay for it?
Yeah, we've done that.
Are you saying they're going
Do you have
they're
anything
going
left in
to,
your budget to pay for?
you say they're going to give us a coach bus for the cost of a school bus?
No.
No.
No,
At least the West would donate for the cause, huh?
no.
It would be nice, wouldn't it?
Something, discount.
Considering the money that's earned year after year after year, they couldn't donate a coach bus? Or at least charge the price of a school? I'm sorry.
But we buy one, get one free.
I'm sorry. I shouldn't open my mouth.
I'm not sure about the coach bus at Seton Hill, but I'm all on board for the one that's for the PIA. Seton Hill's not that very far.
Is he amending his motion?
Are you amending your motion?
Well, I'd like to hear some other discussion.
I'm all for it. Keep the girls cool, make them look good. They've earned it.
To Seton Hill?
Yeah.
$500. It's a little steep.
Okay.
Why don't you
Parents shouldn't have to go out and try to donate, raise money in a week's time.
why don't you call and smooth talk them down?
I can.
I know you can.
So is $500 to Seton Hill, and then it would be an additional amount then wherever the championship is?
Yes.
Anywhere.
500 is the difference between a coach and a school bus.
Yeah, it's $650.
So it's $650. The school bus is about $150. So
Yeah.
the difference is $500,
Yeah.
and that's per trip. Or per round trip, I guess. Right, Charlie? Per round trip?
I'm just saying, if you look at, I'm kind of your thoughts that Seton Hill's Greensburg is about 14 miles away. They'll be there in 15 minutes. After this game on Thursday, they are going to play in the PIA game. It could be as far as Erie, as far as Bedford, Middle State. I would think if we were going to offer them a coach bus there, they're going to play regardless. It would be more well spent to send them on a bus when they're going on the state ride than the Seton Hill.
I agree. I agree.
I'll amend that motion.
So let's get this right now. We're going to squab over $500. We just spent $130.
It's a 14-minute bus ride. It's $650. It's not $500. It's $650.
It's $500 more, right?
Right.
Yeah, that's, for Seton Hill, that's
All right.
ridiculous.
That's good. That makes sense to me.
Unless you can call and get it.
Probably should have called them beforehand. You know, they get $1.6 million off us.
So you're going to amend your motion to be that we pay for the coach bus for the PIAA
Championship.
championship.
Yes.
Did we have a second on that?
Yeah.
Mr. Vice will second
Be all right with that? You second it?
it. Okay, roll call.
Mr. Beistel?
Yes.
Mr. Carson?
Yes.
Mr. Fry?
Yes.
Mr. Polakowski?
Yes.
Mrs. Rhodes?
Yes.
Mrs. Smith?
Yes.
Mr. Alt?
Yes.
Mrs. Love?
Yes.
Motion carries 8 with 1 absent.
I'll tell you what, if the board members can make it, I'd like to see all of us go to Seton Hill if that's where they're going to play and support these girls. They're doing something never been done before. For the whole community. I don't care who it is.
It's
Go
early,
support.
isn't it? The game's early.
Yeah, the game is at 2:30 on
Kids won't even be out of school.
Thursday.
2:50 or 2 o'clock start on, or 2:50
Yeah, my
start
kid
on
was good.
Thursday, May 31st at Seton.
2:15, May 31st at Seton Hill.
We dismiss it.
You say 2:30.
2:15.
May 31st.
Posting of proposed budget for the 2018-2019 year.
It's recommended that the board grant permission for administration to post the proposed final budget as presented for a 30-day period and authorize and direct the secretary to obtain the necessary advertisements therefor. Expenditures of $31,926,627, revenues of $30,000, $30,033,128 plus a fund balance of $1,893,499. This would set the millage rate at 77.15 mils for Westmoreland County and 15.5081 mils for Fayette County. Proposed tax millage rates would be subject to change for final budget adoption in June using the multi-county rebalancing based on methodology of section 672.1A1 of the school code, and that is with a tax increase, or the other option is option B, posting it without a tax increase. It's recommended that the board grant permission for the administration to post the proposed final budget as presented for a 30-day period and authorize and direct the secretary to obtain the necessary advertisements therefor. Expenditures of $31,926,627, revenues of $29,718,345, and a fund balance of $2,208,282. This would set the millage rate at 74.61 mils for Westmoreland County and 14.9982 mils for Fayette County. And again, proposed tax millage rates would be subject to change for the final budget adoption in June using the multi-county rebalancing based on methodology of section 672.1A1 of the school code.
Any discussion?
Yeah, Jim, how much money do we have in the unassigned fund balance?
And projecting, we will end the year with an unassigned fund balance of $2,417,339. Now, those numbers, that number and the other numbers are subject to change as we get closer to year end. And of course, ultimately, they would be satisfied then when our auditor is through auditing the 17-18 school year and we have posted any final adjusting entries that he may have. In fact, for the 16-17 audit, we worked Tuesday afternoon, and then we've been working back and forth via emails this week, and he may have the final audit done next week, but I can't speak for him on that. But yes, that's what I've calculated right now. The committed fund balance will be $42,000. That's firm.
42 million?
42,000.
42,000.
That's the final amount
Of committed.
for the payment that'll happen in July for the old original ERIP program. The assigned fund balance I have calculated at $207,463. We used during the past year $931,804 of the assigned fund balance for the energy savings project that was done last summer, and the final payments were made in late summer, early September. So the total estimated fund balances in total for June 30th, and again, the number that will change is that unassigned, is $2,666,802, and I have a sheet that has that number at the bottom, as well as my current projection for the current year. Again, my projection for this year will change after we complete the month of May, and of course as we continue to work through the month of June. And I will keep watch of those numbers and update the actual revenues. The closer we get to final, the firmer the numbers always become. So those fund balance numbers I read are at the very bottom of this report. You can give one to Ken. And if I can leave some extras here if anyone, reporter or anyone in the public wants to sit. So I think at a prior meeting, Dr. Molnar sent out the historical report, this report that you're seeing, I added I believe I added that's right, just the projection column on the far right was the only thing that's been added to that previous report that Dr. Molnar had sent out. Because, I mean, that's an important thing to start looking at those numbers and firming up the projections as we go along. I hope that answers your question, Ken.
So after we pay either the 1.8 or the 2.2 million, we will have less than $1 million to be available to write a check if we had to?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
The summary, just a summarized report, the one pager that shows the projected estimated ending fund balances, of course the revenues, the expenditures, and the estimated ending fund balance for next year. Again, you know, those numbers are not final. And then, of course, attached to it are some facts on page 2 that are always helpful in answering questions, especially from the reporters. And he has the summary in there also of by the object codes and by the functional codes in the various departments. I'm sorry. Some extras. And I think I said earlier, when we're all said and done with a final budget at the end of June, I will be making, for my office, a couple copies of that 3-ring binder. Now, those of you that were on the board in prior years, you remember what that 3-ring binder, okay? And everybody always turned them back in, and we recycled the binders. If anybody wants the 3-ring binder with all the detailed pages and, of course, the summary pages and the final budget, you know, we'll be glad to put one together. I just thought that in the spirit of, you know, of trying to save money and paper, we would temporarily not do that during these phases of the various drafts.
One of the things that Mrs. Love had asked me to do for tonight, and I didn't have a whole lot of time to put this together because I began it yesterday afternoon, was to put something together that would help us to bring our budget into balance without dipping into our fund balance to the extent that we're predicting. So she had asked me, you know, what it would take to pretty much balance the budget. So I did that, and I attached that to your board docs under the budget. But basically, what it would amount to would be, and these are just some suggestions that I was able to come up with. There weren't a whole lot of areas to take from, but it would be a matter of the elimination of 21 teaching positions, 2 full-time and 2 part-time custodial positions, 1 bus run, the middle school athletic program, the weight room supervisor, and then a few other miscellaneous things, after-school tutoring and after-school tutoring transportation. So that there's a list there that you can see. It's not dissimilar from the list that I gave you in a previous year. I would caution you that I did assign names to the positions, but I assigned those as placeholders, so those are not necessarily the names or the specific programs that would be affected. That would be a decision that administration would be making depending on how deep the board wants us to begin to cut, and then we would certainly go through and prioritize where we thought we could possibly make cuts. I would point out that in the last 18 years, we have reduced our administrative staff by 2.5 positions, our secretarial staff by 2 positions, and our teaching staff by 20 positions over the last 18 years.
I have a question. If things don't change with the state financing, would it be fair to say that next year at this time, if we do nothing this year, that we will be without any money next year? Anybody can answer that.
I understand. Let me contemplate the thought there.
Because you just told me that until all your budget things come in, right now we're looking at less than $1 million. Just for the sake of that, we probably will get some more money in. We'll have over $1 million. This year we're looking at anywhere from 1.8 to 2.2 million. So I don't see how next year, if we continue as is, that we will be able to
we would be
do our budget.
We would be in a precarious cash flow position, and that would be after the 18-19 school year ran its course, and we're planning the 19-20 school year. We would have to look very, very, very hard at a cash flow forecast of those funding sources. Again, it's impossible to predict what the state would do. If we assume that they continue to do what they have been doing, and on our end we do nothing, and by nothing are you assuming no tax increase and no cuts? That would be hazardous. I believe the best approach is to attack the problem from both ends. Match tax increases with appropriate budget cuts. So, for example, what you're getting the equivalent of $2 of savings, whether it's in a dollar increase in taxes and a dollar decrease in expenditures. So that would always be my recommended approach to take. But again, it's very hard to forecast. So we would probably be in a position in June of 20, then when we're looking at the 2021 budget, to be back where probably, the district was years ago before you had those big tax increases. And I didn't bring that sheet with me, but there were 2 years, pre-Act 1 era, where you had like a 9 mil tax increase in Westmoreland County and like another 4 mil increase in Westmoreland County. And of course the equivalent amount of tax increase in Fayette County, not the same in millage, but of course you understand. You would be back in a position of doing one of those tax and revenue anticipation notes to get you through the summer months until tax dollars start coming in from the real estate tax collectors and states start sending out their subsidies, again assuming they pass their budgets on time, because August is the first schedule. There's 5 scheduled payments of the big basic education funding. We had to watch things very closely. Governor Wolf's first budget, 15-16 school year, when it was about 2 or 3 days before New Year's, when they passed what we called the 75% budget, and they released money, and we were watching our cash flow, but we had fund balance to live on, that proverbial fat that gets you through the winter. And if they hadn't passed the budget, we would have been looking at potentially, like some districts had to, of doing some sort of line of credit, but it never came to that. We were able to make it through there. They released monies, and we were okay. So yeah, the more the fund balance gets spent down, obviously that makes your situation of managing your business that much harder.
And so there's no illusion, raising taxes isn't going to cure the problem immediately.
That's
No.
correct. That's correct.
You're right.
It starts to solve the problem. It's like starting your triage of treating the wound, so to speak. No, it won't cure it right away, but it's a start.
So if what your philosophy is to raise the taxes to 329 and make equal strikes to the deficit.
At least that much in strikes.
And even at that, within a year or two, we're still going to be at the point where we're not going to be able to function.
Well, you'll continue that approach. You won't be able to in the odd number year of saying, well, we're not going to raise taxes because it's re-election time. You'll have to forget that philosophy. You'll have to raise again. We'll do an early budget, Vince and I. We'll take a look at an early budget, and please think about whatever final form this budget takes. Okay, that is your starting budget for the following year. Now think about that. That is your basis of your next budget, and from that 18-19 budget, just like this year, the budget we're in, 17-18, was the basis upon which I started building the 18-19 budget. That will be our first draft. So when you walk away with that final budget, in whatever form it is, continue to think about your expenditure areas and what to think about possibly eliminating in the future. I don't think you want to go so drastic in 1 year. I mean, you certainly can do that. But, you have to start picking and choosing the least, try to prioritize it from the most hurtful to the least hurtful, so to speak. And you start from there. You work your way up from the least hurtful ones. And then, of course, any cut's going to hurt somebody in some degree. You want to make cuts that hurt kids the least amount as possible. But yeah, you're going to continue to attack the problem, not solve it in one budget, but solve it over a series of budgets. To me, I think that's a prudent approach to take.
So
you plan it out. You plan it out and do it right.
So as we get ready to vote tonight, we're looking at many years in the future of tax raises every year, and yet we sit here tonight prepared to raise taxes again for the start of what could be many years, and we don't have one proposal that majorly impacts the budget for next year.
I wouldn't use the term many years. It's hard to predict many years. Like you said, in the past 10 years, we only raised taxes 4 times. So,
yeah, but your spending, Jim, has gone from...
You're absolutely correct.
$2 million every year.
Yes,
goes up.
You're absolutely correct.
So $329,000 isn't going to get us there in any amount of years.
That's correct. You're right on. You understand. We all understand. You have your employees, your existing employees tied to their existing contracts, be it a union agreement or a salary and benefit agreement, and they're all tied in with raises. Teachers move on steps, other employees move, so on and so forth. So, just like in this draft, just look at one category. Forget all the other categories for now. Wages and salaries. And again, that's with the changes that we made from our prior meeting. We vote on, except of course the autistic program is not in here, but that would change some of the numbers, but very minutely. But anyway, wages and salaries went up 3.13% across the board. That's an average again, $403,000. So you can assume that without any cuts in personnel, assume the same personnel are here next year at this time, you would be looking at a similar increase in salary, and of course a similar increase in benefits, because again, you've got retirement tied to gross salary, you've got matching Social Security, the health, the dental and vision that go with it. So salary and benefits is the bulk of our budget.
Having just said that about the $403,000, that wipes out any tax raise every year, and yet we'll still be $2 million, or say $1.5 million, if we continue to spend at the rate we are. So that's why I don't see raising taxes every year as a logical solution to the problem. We have a spending problem.
It's part
not a
of
revenue
it's
problem.
part of it's part of the solution, but you still have to make cuts because again, I don't know if it was last year or a season before. I had a graphic showing our expenditure graph, our bar, and then our real estate tax bar, and then what Act 1 tax increase would give us. You know, the fallacy of the Act 1 index is that people say, oh, you get to raise taxes 3.4%. Well, 3.4% of just your property taxes, not your expenditures. So in a district like ours, we are more dependent on state aid than we are on property taxes. A wealthy district, much more dependent on their local property tax base. So when they get an Act 1 increase, it's a nice sizable chunk of money for them. For us, it's not. And I showed that graphic that Act 1 tax increase, I don't know if it was last season or 2 seasons ago, I could pull that out. It wouldn't even cover the retirement jump that we had. Just like you're saying, it wouldn't cover just the salary increase. You're right on with that. We are very limited with that. Gone are the days when you can tax your way out of a situation. Act 1 changed that ball game forever, unless they, change that law. And they did tweak the law. Initially, there were 8 exceptions that would allow you to go beyond the Act 1 increase. And now we're down to only 3 of those exceptions. They took 5 away, so they've limited that. And of course, the ultimate way then is if you need more than Act 1 and more than those few exceptions left, is finally the public referendum vote in your May primary. I don't know any districts in the greater Western PA area that have actually done a public referendum vote. I'm sure somewhere in the Commonwealth they have. I don't know, but I can't say for sure. But
Jim, just because we haven't had time to connect a lot, it's been a busy week for both of us. Last week I had given the board about $105,000 in cuts.
those are in this new number.
Those are in
yes.
Okay, good.
Those cuts are in that revised expenditure number.
Thank you for putting those in. And the second thing is, I did give a list of proposed cuts that total about $1.9 million. That would pretty much decimate what we do here. But we would certainly be willing, if the board has a number that they would like us to look at in reductions of expenditures, we could certainly go in and find places where we might be able to meet that number. I did a 1.9 million knowing that was not a realistic number, but we're looking at a revenue increase of how much, Jim? About 300,000, 300,000 to 400,000. So what would you like to see as an expenditure decrease, and then we can go back and work on that if you give us a number that might be.
There are a number of aspects we can look at, and we all disagree on some of them. But, I'm going to throw it out there for the start of the new year that, we start across the board 5% reduction in everybody's department that we have any control over. You can pick a number. I'm saying 5%. We can't mess with wages and pensions, but there are a lot of places that we're going to have to tighten our belt and start somewhere. 5% across the board in every department.
There's another thing that bothers me is the state budget. What happens if they don't have a budget for 6 months? We get no money from nowhere except our local taxes, like they did last year, right?
Well, you didn't get those either, did you? They held those.
Yeah, you don't get nothing until they have a budget.
We got our local taxes. Those come straight from our local tax collectors.
My own opinion is that
Two
the
areas.
state should have a budget before the school has to have a budget.
Well,
so
that
you
would
know
be-
what you're working on.
That's a state law that I thought should have been passed by now, that the state has to pass their budget by April or May, because you have so many, not only school systems, but you've got so many nonprofits that are tied to state aid that
I think they want you to use your fund balance.
2015 was a disaster for many nonprofits and school systems.
What about some of these assistant coaches in some of these positions? Is there any way we can eliminate some of that?
I believe there is. Charlie, I would defer to you on that. On the list that I gave you, I did put some assistant coaches on that. Are there some reductions we can make in assistant coaching positions?
That way, maybe you can have some more travel, some games, do some of the travel that way, efficient costs.
Also on here that, we have the activity bus and then we have the after-school tutoring transportation. Is there any way we could just go down to one bus on that?
On the activity run?
Yeah, activity and the after-school school tutoring transportation. I can tell you
It's
from years.
possible, the other thing would be the kids that are on there might be along the ride, because right now they kind of split the district, they go down to the clinic. It's something we can look at. And to the point where, I guess, we've got the whole theory run there, or the activity run, honestly, something that.
And that activity run helps a little bit with our reimbursement because we're putting miles on, but I don't
Oh, I
know.
see.
I don't know if
Is that something you can
I don't
kind
know
of
if it
figure out?
makes us money or costs us money. I know that would be, you'd have to apply that formula.
Okay, I forgot about that. Maybe kind of look at that and see if it costs us or not cost us. It might not help us at all.
Can we look at athletic security now that we have more?
Yeah, I mean, we have to look at everything. We just have to.
Activity busing is not state required. It's
Okay.
optional.
Okay. Well, that's something to look at
You know,
then.
Henfield did away with it some years ago. We had to arrange for our kids to get home or go pick them up. It's
I
hard.
mean, in an ideal world, we wouldn't have to be sitting here talking about this kind of stuff.
Correct.
We could add a program. But I mean, my point about the program was, yes, it's a great thing. But we're adding, and then we have this deficit. I couldn't do it. We just have to look at everything, and we have to start.
If you've been reading the newspapers, be it the Tribune Review or the Fayette County papers, it's all over.
Yes.
Well, I think this board has to keep in mind too, that, no matter what we do, we're going to face criticism. If you saw in the newspaper the other day where they wanted to cut some of the sports supplementals, and the parents were all up in arms. Somebody has to bite the bullet somewhere along the line. I mean, as soon as you want to cut this or don't start that, then you have a pack house of those people that want that issue.
Right.
We've got to make the tough decisions.
And it's not easy.
No.
And do we want to have to do this? No,
No.
we don't want to have to do this.
Not at all.
mean, it's
Mr. Alt
just-
made the suggestion of 5% reduction in every department where we can. For example, Jim's 3-person office, I don't know that we're going to get a 5% reduction there, but on the other hand, there are departments, where we might be able to accomplish that, so.
We'll make 10% in his department.
There you go.
Make it squeal.
So
Five of each.
if that's the direction you'd like to go, give us
That's just my
that directive,
opinion.
and
Just one person.
it seems like a good place to start to me.
Pay for play, we've talked about that before. Advertising for the school. I think Mr. Peistel's brought that up before, but can I use your name?
You can use it,
Oh, okay, thank
as
you.
long as you don't, use it in vain.
Advertising and trying to raise money that way. We've talked about a lot of things over the years, but we've never followed through with it.
Well, we actually did follow through on the advertising. Charlie has approached local businesses, and the response has not been.
Kind of got it running off the start a little bit. If you were at the gym this year, you were seeing there was like 5 or 6 sign banners hanging under the scoreboard. So we got about $1,200 given to us to
Start.
And I plan on hitting it a lot harder this year. At least keep it within reason. And we put a banner up, for $200 and right under the scoreboard. And I'm going to try to include it down at the football stadium somehow so they can get the stadium and the gyms. And just off my head, if I can get 15 or 20 more, I might be able to blow $5,000 or $8,000.
One of the other things we talked about, Charlie, that we didn't come through with is renting of our field. Like, I've talked to other communities, they're dying to play on our field. Why aren't we charging them rent coming here?
Kids baseball they're playing, they're gonna rent our fields, for $25 an hour to play baseball there this summer.
I'm talking about big bucks for like the PIAA and all that to come in and play on our football field. They would like nothing more than to play on that field.
Yeah, I mean, they're looking at a certain amount of money.
Well, anything's better than nothing if it's sitting empty.
I'm all for it. I tell anybody, even on this softball committee this year, they're always looking for places to play within reason. They're looking for facility, and a lot of times it all depends on location too. But I definitely can do that with our facility as far as football, put it out there to be used.
Can you go research that, Charlie? Good. Research it from the football field, see if we get playoff games here and stuff like that.
I'll send down there at the WPIL with a form requisition saying that we're willing to have it.
By the same token, we might be able to do the same thing through the HIMBA for their marching bands as well. I don't know, what they pay or what they're willing to pay, but that's worth a look also.
Yeah, and they do
Any
things in the
program.
morning,
Yeah.
more in the morning. Maybe some soccer.
Now that we got all the loose change wrapped up, we need to start collecting some cash.
Yeah, you're right.
It's $25 to rent the ball field, who's gonna help us out?
And we're nickel and diming it here.
And that's not working,
getting
but
to
that's not
that.
gonna help.
Yeah.
No, I think as far as this list,
Such big numbers.
maybe prioritize, go through it and let us know, what we can possibly eliminate.
You want to look at that 5% that Ken talked
Yeah.
about?
Definitely.
It's probably gonna happen.
Gonna have to.
Some areas are gonna be 5, some could be 10, I'm sure
Well, what do
there's
you
a factor.
Ken, you want to make that a motion?
Oh, yeah, I mean, if we're talking about it tonight, sure. I make the motion that we look at reducing all departments at 5%.
Second.
Postal second. Is there any more discussion on that?
On that particular item.
Roll call?
Mr. Carson?
Yes.
Mr. Fry?
Yes.
Mr. Polakowski?
Yes.
Mrs. Rhodes?
Yes.
Mrs. Smith?
Yes.
Mr. Alt?
Yes.
Mr. Beistel?
Yes.
Mrs. Love?
Yes.
Motion carries 8, 1 absent.
Recess.
Can I have a motion to recess for personnel? Mrs. Smith, second?
Oh, wait. We need a motion to post the budget.
Yeah, we didn't do that.
Oh,
Perhaps I should have asked.
I seen you coming back.
Yeah, but we'll get it in the right order here.
can we have a motion to, oh, wait, are we doing it with A or B?
We're not sure yet.
We're doing it next week.
We need a motion to post the budget with either option A or B.
If we do that, this budget is a work in progress, and we are going to continue to whittle away at the deficit. Is that correct?
Can't go up,
Because
can't
I'm
come
not
down.
happy with taking that money out of the fund balance. That's not acceptable to me.
Yeah.
Not that amount,
We
anyway.
can continue to whittle, we can't add to once it's posted.
If you post, even though you previously voted about having preparation of a budget with a millage increase, if your motion is B rather than A,
You can't add.
not to have an increase within the index, then, in my opinion, you are in perilous ground legally to come back at your subsequent meeting at the end of the June 28th or whatever, and then attempt to put a tax increase in. So I've always advised you that you can decrease the tax increase, but not increase it once you've zeroed it out, or increase it at all. So you have to decide whether you're going with A or B and understand those consequences.
Yeah, that's correct. This is like your official draft budget. What we saw before was unofficial
We're going to
draft.
continue to work on it.
Well, this is
try
not
to
your final budget. This is just
chisel away at that.
Yes.
A formal
Please.
proposal. Yes.
So if we,
We've just been directed to
Right,
chisel
right.
5% at a minimum, so.
And also to,
Jack and I will have fun with that red
A
pen.
with the increase because we can't add it on after this.
If you want to keep the option open,
Okay.
I'm not telling you you have to do it, I'm
If-
saying if you want to keep the option open, then you have to go with A. Because if you go with B,
You can't
you
add it.
lose the
Do you understand that?
and also, look, it's prioritize some of these cuts on this sheet to see if it comes down to it, or we're going to have to do it or not.
We can do that.
How about the retirement we talked about with the teachers? Did we progress with that, or are we just going to leave it go?
Well,
Early retirement?
the information has been sent to everyone.
Okay.
The offer has been made.
Okay.
So yeah, it's in place. So we're waiting for responses at this point.
Okay. Jim?
if I may, the problem with that is though that you won't know with finality until July 12th.
We'll have
Which
a
is-
pretty good idea before
You may
that.
have an idea,
Yeah.
but with absolute legal finality.
Can I ask you a question, Jim?
Yes, sir.
As a business manager, which one would you profess to go with to help this thing out as a business manager? With this
Which choices?
A or B?
Oh, definitely A.
Yeah, you're tying your hands if you don't go with that.
Because if you don't go with A, you're locked in.
Yeah.
You can always do no tax increase in June, but you can back away from it doing A. You're not going to do it if you choose B unless you go down the.
You mean, you tell me, if we go with A, we can go back with B if we find more things to cut out of the
Right.
budget to...
That's
You can take out, but you
That's what
can't
the
add.
solicitor
But I
said.
couldn't hear you.
Yes,
I'm not hearing.
yes, I'm sorry.
Yeah, Butch, if you go with A, you can later choose B. But if you go with B tonight, you can't go back to A.
Okay, that's good. Answer my question.
Do we have a motion on the floor?
I make a motion that we go with recommendation A.
Second.
Second.
Mr. Frank? Roll call?
Excuse me, what's the motion?
A.
A.
Okay.
That's with a tax increase, Butch.
Mr. Fry?
Yes.
Mr. Polakowski?
Yes.
Mrs. Rhodes?
Yes.
Mrs. Smith?
Yes.
Mr. Auld?
No.
Mr. Beistel?
Yes.
Mr. Carson?
Yes.
Mrs. Love?
Yes.
Motion carries 7, 1 no, 1 absent.
Now we can recess.
Now can I have a motion to recess for personnel?
So moved.
Mr. Carson? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Mrs. Rhodes? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Personnel.
It's recommended that the board open the position of head varsity wrestling coach.
I'll make a motion, we keep the one up there.
A motion on the floor not to open the position.
Do we have a second?
Which one are you asking for a second?
Yeah.
You made a recommendation.
I made a recommendation. There's a motion on the floor to not open the position.
Do not.
He said
But the motion
to
wants
not.
to open the position.
What did you move, sir?
I
I'm sorry, his is to open.
His is to keep the
My
coach.
recommendation was to open. I don't make motions, I make
Right,
recommendations.
so you're asking for a motion.
Right, so Mr. Beistel made a motion to not open the position.
Right.
I make a motion to open.
Well, we have to
We have to
take care of
get
his motion
Yeah, we have to take
first.
care of his first.
There's no,
So is there a
there's no
second?
there's no second.
There's no second.
Dies.
Motion dies for lack of a second.
Make a motion to open.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Discussion? Roll call?
Mr. Polakowski.
Yes.
Mrs. Rhodes.
Yes.
Mrs. Smith.
Yes.
Mr. Alt.
Yes.
Mr. Beistel.
No.
Mr. Carson.
Yes.
Mr. Fry.
Yes.
Mrs. Love.
Yes.
Motion carries 7, 1 no, 1 absent.
Citizens' comments? I'm sorry, what?
No, just said citizen comment.
Did you previously set the
Hearing none? Motion to adjourn?
Wait, please. Is that already set? As
No.
No,
We have to set a date.
You have to do that.
no.
I'm sorry, no, I was
Yeah.
Hey, please.
We, this time we'll entertain a motion to set a date for the passage of the final budget, recommendation being June 28th.
Thank you very much.
Do I have a motion, or make a motion?
You have to do this, folks. I'm telling you, you have to do this.
You just want me to pick someone?
What do you want?
You need
Just
a date.
date for the final
30 days
budget.
from today to
Final
pass
budget.
the final budget. You need to
June 28th.
set that date and have it advertised.
June 25th is my birthday.
You need a motion for that?
Yes.
Yes.
Don't complicate
I
things.
so be it.
Mr. Beistel,
Mr. Beistel.
second.
How about a second? Mr. Fry. Roll call. Or can we aye?
Roll call, roll call.
Mrs. Rhodes.
Yes.
Mrs. Smith.
Yes.
Mr. Alt.
Yes.
Mr. Beistel.
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Carson.
Yes.
Mr. Fry.
Yes.
Mr. Polakowski.
Yes.
Mrs. Love.
Yes.
Motion carries 8 and 1 absent.
Now citizen comment.
Citizens' comments? Hearing none, motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Questions or comments?
Oh. Is there a card?
Doesn't need a card for the end.
Right.
We don't usually do cards for the end of the meeting.
We have a, what's that, Mr. Beistel?
I'd be excused.
You may be excused.
There was a man who worked here a few years ago. His name was Bill Salem. He was the business manager. And Bill Salem prepared a chart that went from the time he was here until 2018. And that chart specifically said, if this school district continues to spend money at the rate it was spending, compared to the amount of money that it was going to take in, it would be bankrupt. 2018, 2019, bankrupt. And that is exactly and precisely is what we're looking at tonight. On this paper, it shows 31.6 million in expenses and 29.1 in revenue, with a budget deficit of more than $2.5 million. Your unassigned fund balance is about $2.5 million. If something serious does not occur with this budget, you are essentially bankrupt. In 2012, Mr. Alt and I stood in this auditorium, this cafeteria, and we said to you, there are ways to prepare for the future. I don't think the public understands that that big building up on the hill in Alverton contains 2 grades, grades 1 and 2. While we have 600, 700, 800 empty seats in our other buildings. We said to you, look ahead. Not only did you not close Alverton, you are sinking money into it. And you have a $2.5 million deficit and barely enough in your savings account to cover it. I think you have done a terrible disservice to this school district, and the people and the students here deserve better.
Motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second?
I did do it.
Mrs. Rhodes, Mr. Fry. All in favor?
Aye.